Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have notes for Sociology, Chapter 9, talking about race. And to begin with, race is a category of people who are regarded as socially distinct because they share genetically transmitted physical characteristics. But the key here to remember is that there is no such thing today as a pure race because of the fact that people are very mobile. There's kind of a higher level of blending. There are three major anthropological classifications of race, and it kind of comes down to the following Caucasoids. These are Caucasians. They're people with fair skin. They have straight or wavy hair. Mongoloids, these are people that have a yellowish skin, but they have a distinct fold around their eyes. And finally, Negroids are individuals with darker skin, coarse hair, woollier like hair, that would meet that category or classification. For the most part, all of us are a blending of all three of these. We all have certain portions of these different characteristics, probably within our DNA. So, ethnicity, this refers to the cultural features that are handed down from one generation to the next through socialization. And an ethnic group are those people whose physical appearance or their cultural practices are unlike those of the dominant group, making them susceptible to different or unequal treatment. Today, when we talk about ancestral populations throughout the United States, and if we're looking by counties, if you look at the key over here, Germans predominantly um, kind of make up the majority of ancestry through a good portion of the United States. If you look through the Ozarks and Appalachia, you see individuals identifying themselves as more American opposed to any outside ethnicity. In the South, in some urban areas, you may see higher populations of African Americans. Along the American Southwest border, higher numbers of Mexican Americans. So this kind of gives us an indication of maybe where people are from and some of our differences geographically. When we talk about religions, again, if you look at the world population, you could kind of get an idea of maybe where certain religious practices are dominant. In the Western Hemisphere, Christianity, either in the form of Catholicism or Protestantism, is really making up the majority of religions. If you look at parts of Africa, Sunni Islam and a little bit of Shia Islam kind of makes up a good portion of that. And then there is a blending of tribal religions, Christianity, and Muslims kind of in sub Saharan Africa. So take a look at that. We're going to talk about distinguishing features of minority groups. And minority groups, for the most part, are identified by characteristics that are socially visible, meaning that you can see the difference from just sight. Members of a minority group tend to suffer disadvantages at the hands of another group or the group that's in the majority. A minority group is a self conscious group with a strong sense of oneness. Minority groups often are what we call an ascribed status. You were kind of born into that group. And members of minority groups, either by choice or necessity, tend to marry within their same group, or the practice that we call endogamy, opposed to exogamy, marrying outside of your ethnicity or your minority group. There are 6 basic patterns of intergroup hostility and cooperation, and we're going to kind of start with the cooperative side and kind of work our way to the hostile side. But assimilation, this is when minority and majority differences are eliminated because minorities reassimilate and they're absorbed into the dominant culture by taking on new cultural and physical traits. You have pluralism, where basically in some cultures you have minority groups that maintain their distinct cultural differences or their physical traits, but they coexist with the dominant group. So they're not necessarily letting go of their past to blend in with the group that they're in currently. You may see legal protection of minorities, especially here in the United States. Even though we have a democracy and democracy kind of focuses on majority rights. Minorities, for the most part, are protected by a lot of laws within our society. Kind of heading towards the hostile side, population transfer. Sometimes this is kind of known by the slang as white flight, but it's a situation where there is intense hostility between groups, maybe minority groups are removed from a certain area voluntarily or involuntarily. It may be such a thing where the dominant group moves away, leaving the minority group, or it may be because of discriminatory practices, such as like realtors not selling homes or showing homes to people of certain minority groups. Continued subjugation, anytime that you see the word subjugate, it's kind of like talking about historical um, discrimination in a sense. In a historical vantage, the majority group openly exercises its privilege at the expense of the minority group. So when we talk about certain racism practices here in the United States, certain groups have been targeted for generations, for centuries. And then finally, kind of the worst of the worst, extermination, the elimination of an entire racial, cultural, or ethnic population. Um, this is the most severe as far as hostile behaviors are concerned when we talk about relations. Racism is the belief that one racial or ethnic group is inferior to another and thus deserves unequal treatment, and then hence that's justified. Prejudice is an irrational, inflexible attitude towards an entire group of people. You can be prejudiced, but not necessarily act on that. And that's something that we need to kind of keep in the back of our minds. And then finally, discrimination. This is the action. This is the actual unequal treatment of people, um, or groups, basically based on their group membership. Sources of prejudice, stereotypes. These are the rigid mental images that summarize whatever is believed to be typical about the group. Authoritarian personalities, a distinct set of traits centering on conformity, intolerance, or insecurity. Irrationality, illogical, and inconsistent. Prejudiced people aren't concerned about the genuine group characteristics. They simply accept the negative statement and it kind of feeds their existing hostility. Scapegoating, that's placing blame for one's troubles on a relatively powerless individual or group. And then finally, the social environment. The sources of prejudice mentioned appear to be primarily psychological, including thoughts, feelings that are developed and shaped by their social context. In class, we're watching a film called The Class Divided. This is about Jane Elliott and her little classroom project back in the 60s and 70s in Riceville, Iowa. This is going to be one of our questions for a short answer on our test. You may want to take a look at the link for the video and be able to answer this question as a result of that. Thank you very much.